A young Namibian man invented a seamless and airtime-free phone that can make calls to anywhere in the world.
A shocking breakthrough has emerged from northern Namibia. A teenager has built a phone that works without a SIM card, airtime, or even a cellular network. How is this even possible? And could it change how the entire world communicates? Let's find out. It began as a local science fair headline but has since grown into a story with the potential to disrupt entire industries. A Namibian youth, Simon Petrus, has designed and built a phone that does not require a SIM card, airtime, or even a mobile network to function. This is not a concept sketch or a theoretical prototype gathering dust in a university lab. It is a working device built by hand, using recycled parts, and it does exactly what it claims: makes voice calls entirely independent of telecom infrastructure. The immediate reaction from local observers was disbelief. In a country where mobile coverage in rural areas is patchy at best, and where airtime can consume a significant portion of household income, this device seemed almost too good to be true. Yet, Simon demonstrated it in real time, showing how two users could hold clear, stable conversations over distance without the aid of cellular towers. The calls were free, direct, and unhindered by signal dropouts or prepaid airtime balances. This invention comes at a time when discussions about technological self-reliance in Africa are louder than ever. Most of the continent's communication infrastructure is controlled by foreign-owned telecom companies and global network operators. For millions, access to mobile communication depends not on necessity, but on affordability. And often, affordability loses. Simon's device flips this equation, suggesting a future where basic communication is no longer a paid privilege, but a freely accessible utility. The announcement has set social media abuzz, with many hailing Simon as a symbol of what African youth can achieve when innovation meets necessity. In a world where new smartphones are marketed as luxury devices costing hundreds of dollars and requiring constant monthly payments, this phone represents a completely different philosophy: communication without corporate dependency. It's not simply about making a call. It's about removing one of the biggest barriers to staying connected. Technologists and science educators have called it a moment of possibility. If a teenager in rural Namibia can take old landline parts, pieces of broken televisions, and components from two-way radios to create a functional, independent communication system, what does that say about untapped potential across Africa? The story also challenges a persistent stereotype: that breakthrough technology must come from Silicon Valley or high-tech Asian hubs. Simon has proved innovation can spring from the unlikeliest of places, driven not by venture capital, but by pure determination. Of course, questions remain. Can this invention be scaled? Will it face regulatory barriers, given that it uses radio frequencies typically monitored and licensed by governments? Will investors see its potential, or will it be dismissed as a curiosity rather than a commercial opportunity? What is clear is that this one prototype has already sparked national conversation about what Africa's technological future might look like if young people are empowered to solve local problems with homegrown solutions. The breaking news is not just about a teenager building a phone. It's about the world seeing a glimpse of what could be an entirely new way of thinking about connectivity. When news broke that Simon Petrus had created a phone that functions without a SIM card, airtime, or network coverage, the immediate question from skeptics was simple: how? The answer lies not in a futuristic billion-dollar laboratory innovation, but in an intelligent rethinking of old technology, radio frequency communication. Most mobile phones rely on a complex web of infrastructure: cell towers, satellite links, fiber optic backbones, and licensed spectrum bands controlled by telecom operators. Without these, a traditional phone is essentially useless. Simon, however, bypassed the entire system by building a device that communicates directly between handsets, transmitting voice signals over shortwave radio frequencies. This approach is similar to how walkie-talkies operate, but with a critical difference. He designed it to deliver voice clarity comparable to modern telephones and to extend its effective communication range beyond basic two-way radios. The secret lies in his custom-built circuitry. Simon salvaged components from old landline phones, two-way radios, and even broken televisions to design a transmitter-receiver hybrid capable of converting analog voice signals into radio frequencies and back again. These signals travel directly from one phone to another on assigned frequencies, meaning users can have private conversations without a single cent spent on airtime or data. Unlike commercial walkie-talkies, which are often limited to a few hundred meters or, at best, a few kilometers, Simon's device was tuned to cover greater distances. He achieved this by repurposing parts of analog television antennas and adding customized amplification modules. The result is a handset that allows free, clear conversations across rural landscapes where cell signals often don't exist in the first place. But the invention didn't stop at calling. Knowing that many rural households also lack steady electricity, Simon integrated a power solution that eliminates dependency on a national grid. The phone runs on a homemade radiator-based power system combined with rechargeable batteries. This design allows the device to not only function independently of telecom networks, but also to remain operational in areas where power outages are frequent, or electricity access is non-existent. The additional built-in features reveal Simon's holistic approach. He included a small analog TV receiver so users can access local broadcasts without a separate device, an LED light for use during power cuts, a mini fan to offer cooling in hot climates, and USB charging ports to keep other small devices powered. In essence, his invention is more than just a phone. It's an all-in-one survival tool for off-grid communities. For decades, experts have discussed creating mesh networks or off-grid communication devices, yet most solutions either remain theoretical or required expensive hardware. Simon's design achieves this with scrap electronics and ingenuity, showing that network-free communication is not limited to futuristic projects by tech giants, but can be built by a determined individual with limited resources. However, operating outside traditional telecom systems raises questions of spectrum regulation, interference, and privacy. Radio frequencies are often tightly controlled, and devices operating on them can require licenses or adherence to technical standards. Simon's device, for now, operates more as a proof of concept than a commercially certified product. But its mere existence demonstrates that communication doesn't have to be tethered to corporate-controlled towers and monthly bills. A powerful idea in places where infrastructure is limited and financial resources are scarce. What Simon Petrus has shown is that the barrier to entry for independent communication is lower than most people think. His prototype stands as evidence that innovation doesn't always mean inventing something entirely new. Sometimes it means reimagining existing technologies in ways that serve those who have been left out of mainstream solutions. Let's pause for a second to say, big thank you to the Black Culture Diary community, where Black voices, stories, and legacies are preserved and amplified. By becoming a member, you're not just supporting the channel, you're becoming part of a powerful cultural movement. Let's continue. Simon Petrus's phone is more than just a science project. It represents a paradigm shift in how Africa might approach one of its biggest challenges: affordable, reliable communication. While most of the world takes instant connectivity for granted, millions of Africans still live in areas where mobile coverage is inconsistent, if it exists at all. And even when networks are available, using them often comes at a financial cost many households cannot comfortably afford. By removing the need for SIM cards, airtime, or traditional network towers, Simon's device addresses this challenge at its root. In villages where mobile phones are expensive luxuries and top-up cards consume a significant share of income, his invention offers a zero-cost alternative once the hardware is in hand. It allows people to communicate across distances without being tethered to any telecom provider, removing an entire layer of dependency on companies that have historically prioritized urban markets over remote ones. For farmers in rural Namibia and beyond, this could mean coordinating the transport of crops, livestock sales, or emergency help without walking miles to find a signal or pay for airtime. For students, it could mean discussing schoolwork or organizing community study groups without needing a phone plan. Families separated by long distances could stay connected freely, turning communication from a financial burden into a basic right. This is particularly relevant for regions of Africa where infrastructure development has lagged behind population growth. Telecom operators often hesitate to build cell towers in remote or sparsely populated areas because the return on investment is low. That has left many communities with little to no mobile service and reliant on costly workarounds, such as traveling to network hotspots or relying on shared community phones. A phone like Simon's changes that dynamic by bypassing infrastructure limitations entirely. Another critical aspect is resilience during crises. In times of natural disaster, political unrest, or even simple power grid failures, traditional networks can fail, leaving communities isolated. Because Simon's phone uses radio frequency communication and is powered by an independent energy source, it offers a robust communication lifeline during emergencies. This alone could make it invaluable in humanitarian and disaster response scenarios across Africa. The phone also challenges the perception of African technology development. Too often, innovation on the continent is seen through the lens of adoption rather than creation, Africans using imported technology rather than inventing their own. Simon's invention disrupts that stereotype. Here is a device conceptualized, built, and successfully demonstrated by an African youth using mostly recycled materials. It signals that innovation does not have to trickle down from tech hubs like Silicon Valley or Shenzhen. It can emerge from a small workshop in northern Namibia and still hold global relevance. Beyond the technology itself, the invention could have social and economic ripple effects. If scaled and supported, local manufacturing of such devices could create jobs, empower communities, and reduce the continent's dependence on imported smartphones and telecom solutions. It could also inspire a generation of young African innovators to think differently, to look at the problems around them and design solutions rather than waiting for outside intervention. However, being a game changer does not mean challenges don't exist. Questions about regulation, mass production, and long-term sustainability will need to be addressed before Simon's invention can move from a prototype to a continent-wide phenomenon. But what it offers right now is a vision of independence, a glimpse of an Africa where communication is not a privilege governed by wealth or location, but an essential service available to everyone. But for Simon Petrus, the journey from tinkering with discarded electronics in his family's yard to becoming a national sensation was as fast as it was unexpected. What began as a high school science project, a bold attempt to create a phone that could operate without any network infrastructure, quickly captured the imagination of teachers, engineers, and policymakers across Namibia. It wasn't just the functionality of the device that stood out. It was the vision behind it, the idea that a teenager could rethink communication in a way even established telecom firms had not dared to pursue. Simon first unveiled his invention at the National Science Fair, where judges were initially skeptical. How could a home-built device achieve what multinational corporations with entire research divisions had not? But his live demonstration silenced doubters. He placed a call on stage using his self-made phone, connecting with another handset built from the same design, without a SIM card or network. The crowd erupted. Simon walked away with first prize, an achievement that put his name in national headlines almost overnight. The story resonated deeply with the public, particularly in rural communities that felt the strain of poor network coverage and expensive airtime. Local newspapers and radio stations framed Simon as an example of what African youth could accomplish when they applied practical skills to real-world problems. Social media amplified his achievement, with many calling him Namibia's young tech genius and the boy who beat the telecom giants. However, while public interest was high, institutional support was noticeably absent. Namibia, like many countries, has no established pipeline for moving youth innovations from science fairs to mass production. Investors were hesitant, citing regulatory challenges around using open radio frequencies for personal communication devices. Government agencies praised Simon's ingenuity, but provided no concrete funding or pathways to further develop the technology. The result? The invention that had the potential to transform communication remained a one-off prototype stored safely, but unused on a larger scale. For Simon personally, this was both motivating and frustrating. He pursued further education, enrolling in and eventually completing a degree in electronics engineering in 2023, determined to refine his skills and push his idea forward. But without dedicated research grants, mentorship programs, or industrial backing, the transition from concept to a market-ready product proved far more difficult than building the original prototype. This is not unusual. Across Africa, many young inventors face a similar dilemma. They have the ideas and technical know-how, but no access to manufacturing infrastructure, investment capital, or the legal expertise required to patent and protect their innovations. Despite these challenges, Simon's achievement still inspired a wave of curiosity among Namibia's youth. Workshops and school programs cited his story as proof that innovation does not require high-end labs or massive budgets, just creativity and determination. Teachers reported increased interest in electronics clubs and science competitions, with more students attempting projects aimed at solving everyday problems in their communities. Yet, a lingering question remains: why has such a promising idea not attracted the kind of support it deserves? Some argue that it exposes a gap in how African nations nurture innovation, celebrating inventors in the media while failing to create an ecosystem that can transform their creations into viable products. For Simon, this has meant returning to the drawing board, continuing research on how to expand the phone's range, improve its components, and prepare it for eventual commercialization, all while seeking funding on his own. What his story highlights is an uncomfortable truth. Innovation alone is not enough. Without an enabling environment, even groundbreaking ideas risk being left behind. Simon Petrus proved that independent, zero-cost communication is possible. Whether it becomes an African reality or just a brilliant memory depends on what happens next. Here's a reminder to please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on Black culture, history, civilization, and identity. Let's continue now. Simon Petrus's invention now stands at a crossroads. It has proven itself in concept, captured the imagination of Namibia, and sparked debate about Africa's ability to produce world-changing technology from within its borders. Yet, as is often the case with groundbreaking innovations, what happens next will determine whether it becomes a forgotten prototype or the foundation of a movement that changes how millions communicate. The potential applications are enormous. A phone that bypasses traditional telecom infrastructure could solve one of Africa's most persistent development problems: the high cost and limited accessibility of communication. Rural communities that have long been ignored by telecom companies could form their independent communication networks, paying nothing for calls and relying on devices designed for their realities rather than for wealthy urban markets. In humanitarian crises, such as floods, droughts, or conflict zones where infrastructure is destroyed, this phone could provide an instant emergency communication lifeline, saving lives where traditional systems fail. However, scaling the technology faces multiple obstacles. The first is funding. Manufacturing such devices at scale requires investment in materials, assembly, quality testing, and distribution. While Simon built his prototype from recycled parts, mass production would require access to standardized electronic components and factories capable of producing them reliably. Without outside investment or government backing, the cost of moving from one handmade device to thousands of units remains prohibitive. The second challenge is regulatory approval. Radio frequencies are often tightly controlled by governments to prevent interference with military, aviation, or broadcast signals. For Simon's invention to be sold widely, it would need to operate on legal frequencies or secure exemptions from authorities, processes that can take years and involve complex negotiations. For many private investors, these regulatory uncertainties make early involvement risky. Yet there is another factor that could accelerate adoption: the growing African innovation ecosystem. Across the continent, technology hubs and incubators are emerging, providing mentorship and resources to young innovators. If Simon's phone were to be taken up by one of these programs, it could receive not only funding, but also strategic guidance on navigating patents, certifications, and supply chain management. Governments, too, are beginning to recognize the value of supporting homegrown inventions, particularly those addressing local infrastructure gaps. Public sentiment is another powerful force. Many Africans see Simon as a symbol of possibility, proof that solutions don't always have to come from Silicon Valley or Asia. Social media campaigns have already called for crowdfunding to support him, and there is growing pressure on Namibia's government to step in and help move the invention forward. This public demand could influence policymakers to create special funding programs or partnerships with universities and private companies to bring the phone to market. Ultimately, whether this innovation takes off will depend on a combination of vision and support. If investors see beyond short-term profit concerns and governments embrace policies that encourage independent communication solutions, Simon's phone could mark the start of a new chapter in Africa's technology story. One where rural connectivity is no longer dictated by corporate interests but by community needs and grassroots ingenuity. For Simon himself, the work continues. He has not stopped refining his designs, exploring ways to extend signal range, improve power efficiency, and make the device cheaper to produce at scale. The dream remains alive, an Africa where no child has to walk miles just to make a phone call, where families in remote villages are as connected as those in capital cities, and where the cost of staying in touch is no longer a burden. The next steps are uncertain, but one thing is clear. This invention has already broken one barrier: the belief that such technology is impossible. The question now is whether Africa and the world are ready to break the next one, turning it into reality. Would you use a phone that works without airtime or a SIM card? Do you think Africa can lead the world in independent communication technology? Let us know in the comment section. Should governments invest in inventions like Simon Petrus's phone immediately? Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If so, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it. We have decided to bring videos on something nobody talks about: Black culture, civilization, history, and evidence about how glorious Blacks have been. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.